I'm delighted to be here with Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield this evening. First and foremost, on behalf of Global Minnesota, thank you so much for being here to speak at our free public forums today.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be here, and I look forward to meeting the crowd this evening.
Great. Well, as you know, Global Minnesota selected South Africa as a focus country for the upcoming year.
Mm-hmm.
And this evening you'll be speaking more about South Africa. I'd like to ask you to start by highlighting what you see as some current issues or trends in South Africa that Global Minnesota will want to explore in the upcoming year.
Well, good. That's an excellent question, because South Africa is in the news this year for a lot of reasons, but the main one is that they have an upcoming election in February of 2019. And anyone who is interested in South Africa, whether for investment purposes, socially, or just because they're interested in Africa, will be looking to see how these elections end. The current president of South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa, is running for president. He was elected or selected by his party to fulfill the last 2 years of the term for former President Zuma. Zuma's presidency was filled with quite a bit of controversy, corruption, state capture, a lot of scandals, and Ramaphosa is seen as a new day. And the hope that most South Africans have, and I think the private sector has as well, is that Ramaphosa will be able to move forward with a new agenda that will take South Africa to the next level of democracy.
Wonderful. Ambassador, you have a real breadth and depth of experience with Africa. How would you characterize the role of South Africa on the African continent?
You know, that too is an excellent question. South Africa is the leader. It is one of the leaders, I should say, because if people from a few other African countries hear me say South Africa is the leader, I'd probably make a few enemies, but it is among the leaders on the continent, and it is certainly the leader in the Southern Africa region. Its economy is the highest performing economy, even with its problems. The country is a continental player. It's a global player. So South Africa is looked to for leadership, and South Africa is considered a leader by most of its neighbors. And I think we'll see that become even more apparent once they get through this election. They've been internally focused over the past year, and I suspect that once President Ramaphosa, or whomever is elected, I shouldn't presume who's going to be elected, but once the election takes place, South Africa will have more time to play a much more concrete leadership role on the continent.
As you know, Minnesota has a large African diaspora. Somalis, Kenyans, Liberians, and many others have really been instrumental in building Minnesota's ties with Africa. What role can the diaspora play in the broader U.S. Relationship with Africa, or U.S. foreign policy with Africa?
You know, I'm regularly asked that question, and my answer is one that surprised a lot of people. What I see is an important role for the diaspora community to play in foreign policy is advocacy. We, as foreign policy makers, as policy makers, and I'm no longer one, but I was for 35 years, we want to hear what the diaspora community think about our policies in their countries. We want to hear from the Somalis. We want the Somalis to engage with their members of Congress. We want the diaspora community to engage with the administration, to give us their insight on what we ought to be thinking and what we ought to be doing on the continent of Africa, but also to encourage additional funding, to encourage more focus, to encourage a different policy approach. It is only the diaspora that can do that. The other area where I think the diaspora plays an important role, that is reach back to their countries. I've seen statistics that indicate, even in the case of Somali, billions of dollars are flowing back in remittances to Somalia. This is more money than any of us could give in foreign aid, and this is an important role that the diaspora community does for their home country.
Excellent points, thank you. Finally, for those thinking about a potential career in diplomacy, as you mentioned, you've had a long career in diplomacy, foreign policy. What advice would you offer?
Do it. You know, I was in the Foreign Service for 35 years. And as I look back on those 35 years, I have absolutely no regrets. I have no assignment that I didn't like. I have no job that I didn't find challenging and rewarding. Being in the public service, whether it's foreign service or working domestically, you work for taxpayers, you work for the people. And it gives me tremendous pride when I walk into my building, whether I'm overseas or I'm in Washington, and I see the American flag flying outside, and I know that that means that I'm here to work for the people. I take great pride every single day that the job that I'm doing is going to help improve somebody's life. And sometimes I don't know what I've done in a particular day that improved a life, but I know that I've done something. And then every once in a while you find out. And one example of my finding out, I was walking on the streets of Virginia and a young man said, "Hi, are you Linda?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I'm a refugee from South Sudan, and you helped me when I was living in the refugee camp." And I have not gotten over that, the pride that I felt, but also the feeling that the jobs that we do every day does make a difference. And that's the feeling that you will get if you decide to pursue a career in the Foreign Service. And I encourage that. If it's not in the Foreign Service, I also encourage young people to consider Peace Corps. There's no better experience. I never did it, but I've had lots of contact and lots of relationships with Peace Corps volunteers when I've lived overseas, and they too show such pride in their work that I have come to have tremendous respect for what they do. So again, I say just do it.
Great. If I can take the liberty of asking one more question.
Sure.
Based on your response, Global Minnesota's role is to work to educate our community here in Minnesota about foreign policy issues, global topics. What impact can education for our public about these types of issues have, especially as we try to formulate good foreign policy for the future?
Well, I truly appreciate what you're doing. Sometimes we have a sense that Americans outside of Washington, D.C. don't understand what we do as foreign policymakers, as diplomats, as their representative overseas. And we spend a lot of time in Washington talking about how we can get that message outside of Washington, how we can go to our little hometowns and talk to people about what we do, to talk to people about the importance of foreign affairs, the importance of diplomacy, the importance of engagement, the importance of the State Department having a budget that allows it to do its job. And so what you do in Global Minnesota, that helps get that message out. And I wish they were more global Baton Rouge, I'm from Baton Rouge, or global other places in the world, that in the United States, where ordinary Americans who are not necessarily involved in foreign policy on a daily basis can get a picture of what it is that we do and gain an appreciation for what we do, so that they too can say to their congressman, it is important that you support the efforts of our diplomats overseas. But the most important thing is, I think that every foreign service officer, like every military officer, should be thanked for their service every time we see them. Unfortunately, our uniform is the same uniform that everyone wears, so they don't know that we're foreign service officers. But if you meet a foreign service officer, thank them for their service. They spend they make a tremendous commitment to our country. They make tremendous sacrifices, and we've had a few, unfortunately, lose their lives in the line of duty. So again, I would encourage you to thank them for their service, but I also thank you for making it possible for me and others to bring to you what we do overseas and to share with you the experiences and help educate the population about the world outside of their hometowns.
Wonderful. Well, let me thank you, Ambassador Thomas-Greenfield, for your service on behalf of the United
Thank
States.
you.
And thank you for your time this evening. We appreciate it.
Thank you.